Do the words free time or relaxation sound foreign to you? Perhaps you've been stuck in the office too long, battling cyber threats or worrying about the next strain of ransomware. Let Sophos help provide peace of mind 24/7, 365 with cybersecurity delivered as a service. Because we want you to get back to your weekends, family dinners, and everything in between. And you'll get there with Sophos. Visit securityweekly.com/Sophos to learn more. The cybersecurity landscape is full of single solution providers, making it easy for unexpected cyber threats to sneak through the cracks. That's why Fortra is creating a stronger, simpler strategy for protection, one that increases your security maturity while decreasing the operational burden that comes with it. This is all possible thanks to Fortra's best-in-class portfolio and deep bench of expert problem solvers. Fortra's integrated, scalable solutions help customers face their toughest challenges with confidence. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Fortra, Fortra.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bill Brenner, VP of Content Strategy at Cyber Risk Alliance and Security Weekly. And here we are. We're on the final stretch of RSA 2023. And for me, I can't think of a better way to end it than talking about what's going on at Cisco Talos. And to do that, I'm joined with Nick Biasini, Head of Outreach for Cisco Talos. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
So let's dive right in. So talk to me about some of the key trends you're seeing within Talos as you explore that threat landscape on behalf of customers. And
yeah, absolutely. So one of the things we're seeing right now is, with remote work and hybrid work here to stay, the attack surface is really expanding at an incredible rate. Now you have, users using a bunch of disparate systems. They all have a bunch of disparate technology stacks, and they're connecting from a bunch of disparate locations all around the globe. You're dealing with a very, very challenging environment. And to make things worse, what we're seeing from an adversary perspective is kind of a collapsing. Right? You see all of these groups are all using the same offensive security tools, the same open source, the same cracked versions. You have everybody's using Cobalt Strike, Brute Ratel. They're all using whatever in vogue offensive security framework is out there. And it makes it very difficult from a defender's perspective, because if you get an alert that's, say, a Cobalt Strike beacon, right, gets blocked, but is that a script kiddie dropping a crypto miner? Is it an extortion or a ransomware group looking for a foothold into your enterprise? Is it a nation state looking to launch an espionage campaign, right? It's very difficult to tell who's actually behind the keyboard and what they're trying to do. And to make things worse, they're living off the land increasingly, so they're not doing the things that used to be easy, like downloading malware. Now it's like the goal is get onto a system, fish credentials, log in, and start acting like a normal user. Use the tools that are there. Make use of the things that are already available on the systems, and it's tough out there.
Blending in. And it comes at it goes without saying we live in interesting times. Why do we, this hybrid approach, we would have gotten here without the pandemic, but the pandemic definitely was gasoline on the fire.
Yeah, and it presents a lot of unique challenges, right? How do you keep track of users that are logging in from 50 different locations and using their kids are picking up their laptops and doing who knows what's, but there's just lots of challenges associated
Shadow
with
IT.
It. Yep.
Yeah, so, and we also have, Ukraine, China being China, with attacks coming from there. So let's talk for a little bit about where Talos sees most of this attack activity coming from. So the folks who, are phishing and pretending to be normal users, is it all, there's that portion that they're just doing it to make money, but there's a lot of geopolitical stuff going on to motivate people. So what are you seeing on that, to that regard?
So from a geopolitical stance, I mean, we see the same actors doing the same attacks that they normally would. The thing that really stands out, again, is it's not necessarily about active exploitation or malware deployment. It's about getting credentials. And I mean, we talked about remote work. A big part of that is everyone has VPN access. So now, if you're able to compromise a user, you can log into a VPN and do way more damage in a much more covert way than trying to do it by knocking over a system and exploiting it actively.
And in the meantime, we have companies that struggle when it comes to things like incident response, managing this suddenly enormous cloud infrastructure in front of them. And I know that Cisco did some research, and one of the numbers that leapt out at me was only 15% expressing this readiness, ransomware readiness. So talk a bit about that.
It's tough. I mean, the basics really make a difference. So it's very difficult to be ready and prepared for those types of attacks when you don't even understand the assets that you're responsible for. I mean, how can you adequately protect a network when you don't even know all of the devices that you're supposed to protect? There's just a lot of challenges, not to mention there's a massive skill shortage. It is incredibly difficult to find people to be able to manage and run these systems, and you're left with a decision of very difficultly trying to find and maintain talent or using managed service providers and trying to find the balance of a way to be ready when these actors inevitably come knocking on your door. I mean, that's the other thing is increasingly, because we are seeing coalescing of tools, it's not about the tools anymore. It's about the actors behind the tools. I mean, we're operating largely in a mercenary landscape right now, and the sooner people realize that, the better.
Yeah. Now, every RSA, there's a hype focal point. So the year of zero trust, the year of ransomware, which I think was several RSAs in a row. And here we still are. This year, AI. Not because it's new, but because things like ChatGPT have further democratized the use of it. And
Absolutely.
So this is a two-pronged question. So there's the darkness and the light. On the darkness end of things, talk about how you see adversaries using AI right now to do all the things that you have just spoken about in terms of getting credentials. And
So it's interesting. So I kind of like to decouple the two things. So there's AI, which is a very broad term, and then there's the language models like the ChatGPT things. ChatGPT,
generative AI.
Yeah, generative AI. So ChatGPT and generative AI, to me, doesn't fundamentally change the landscape in any way. It does create the ability for adversaries to do things like write really convincing lures and develop very effective spear phishing, but you just have a lure, you just have a spearfish, you still have to build the infrastructure, you still have to get it in front of the user, you still have to weaponize the access. ChatGPT doesn't help you with any of that. There is no net benefit to it. Again, we have sophisticated lures today. We have very good spearfishing techniques today. All it's going to do is provide maybe some more access to more users, but it doesn't fundamentally change the challenges that we face in security. It's just going to be more of the same of what we're already seeing. Now, if you're talking specifically about AI, I think there is potential for that to have a very large impact, but not in the ChatGPT generative AI aspect. More of you have the ability to train artificial intelligence on your own data set and make use of it. If you were to take an AI and train it heavily on vulnerability data and exploit data, you potentially could have a very powerful tool. but it is not something that everyone is going to have access to. This is only going to be your state-sponsored groups, enterprises with very deep pockets. This stuff is extraordinarily expensive to actually use. It will have an impact, but it is not going to be democratically distributed. It's going to be left to a very, very small group of adversaries.
So, based on everything that you've been seeing, how would you, there's that 15% readiness statistic, but by and large, what are your thoughts on how security as an industry is doing? Are we winning this battle? Are we losing it? My sense is,
I feel like it's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I feel like we're generally the overall security intelligence and security hygiene of average users we see is rising. Users are getting better at understanding how to operate on devices. The flip side of that is social engineering is alarmingly effective and easy. And I'm just seeing so much of it that it causes me some concern. So yes, I think we are getting better at preventing things like active exploitation and the ability to compromise systems from the outside. We're getting better at it, but we're falling down when it comes to educating our users to not facilitate the compromise that's necessary. So now the bad guys increasingly, they're going to call you on the phone. They're going to tug at your heartstrings. They're going to threaten you. They're going to figure out a way to get you to do what they need. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of positive on the horizon there.
Any advice in the face of that?
Make sure that you really concentrate on social engineering in your user education. We did a really, really good job of saying, don't click links, don't open attachments, but we didn't say don't respond to text messages and don't pick up the phone. And that's kind of where we are now, is they're going to go after your text.
That's where phishing has moved. It's gone to the browser. It's gone to text.
It's going it's going to the areas where we didn't spend 2 decades telling users, don't do that.
Yep. All right. That is a perfect place to end it. Pleasure having you here.
Yeah, it's great being here.
And to everyone tuning in, for those who are traveling, be safe, be well, and thank you for joining us. And we're back. Hello again, everybody. I'm Bill Brenner, VP of Content Strategy at Cyber Risk Alliance and Security Weekly. I'm delighted to be sitting here with Geoff Bibby, Senior Vice President, Cybersecurity, Marketing, and Strategy at OpenText Cybersecurity. Welcome.
Thank you, Bill.
So, OpenText has been around a while.
Yeah.
But a lot of people may not be familiar with what the priorities, what the thrust of the organization has been in the last year or two.
Sure.
And here we are, we're at RSA. Everybody has a lot of things to announce.
Mm-hmm.
Tell your story.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. I'd love to. I'm very proud to tell the story. So, as you just said, OpenText it's a well-respected enterprise brand, and what people may not know, though, is just how it's assembled an incredible presence for the cybersecurity market. And so, most recently, we actually just completed the largest acquisition in the company history of Micro Focus, which included 4 very, very powerful and well-known enterprise brands. And so Fortify, NetIQ, ArcSight, and just to name a few, and of course, Voltage. And so that gives us the power to be able to address any security needs for large enterprises. Then they had also, back in 2019, it acquired Carbonite and Webroot. And so really, really strong story for the mid-market, for MSPs. I came into the picture by way of the legacy Zix Upriver team, and we were acquired by OpenText And so we brought in a whole different element, also more for the SMB market. But what's really unique is that we also have, at Webroot and Carbonite, have incredible consumer footprints. And so the whole continuum can be serviced from, an individual user who wants endpoint protection and backup, all the way up to the most sophisticated case where somebody wants whatever, if it's data security, data privacy for Voltage, or if you want to do something like AppSec with Fortify. So it's an incredible story. We're proud to be out here. This is the first time that we're actually in a big security event telling the story.
What would you describe as the most important focus for the company right now?
So the company really appreciates the power of the cybersecurity market and the need to deliver. OpenText has built the brand on being an information management company. And so smarter information management is the focus of the organization. We also believe that there's the real need for smarter security. And our definition of smarter security is simplified security. And so simplified to us is being able to actually get the whole breadth of security offerings I just mentioned to you, getting those under one umbrella. That's what we view as simplified. And so in an SMB or MSP case, for example, we've taken the Webroot solutions and the Carbonite solutions and made them available via one single pane of glass for our partners to be able to consume. So that's the kind of journey we're on, to simplify and deliver things across the whole continuum of what we have in a way that's easier for our customers and partners to consume.
Now, every year at RSA, there's the hype topic.
Mm-hmm.
The hype topic this year is AI, which, as you and I were discussing before we went live, is certainly not something new, but tools that have become more publicly available, generative AI,
mm-hmm.
it has really brought that focus up a few decibels.
Oh, yeah.
So talk about, for better or worse,
mm-hmm.
where you see it fitting in to the OpenText
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
story and what you do.
It's exciting. It's really exciting, and absolutely, yeah. I mean, I guess last year was XDR was the order of the day, and now we're into AI. As we talked about, I think first and foremost, what it's going to force a lot of organizations to do, as it should, is to have a policy framework in place and understand how you're going to, allow that into your organization and what you're going to do with your dev environments. That's obviously, a huge part of what we're doing right now. We use machine learning and have for a long time to improve our libraries, our policy controls that are looking for, unwanted mail. That's been used forever. And so it's something that we're going to take in stride and deliver it for consumption to our customers when they want it. But first and foremost is just meeting it where it is right now, which is still just needs a lot of policy safeguards before it's really ready for all ingestion and everything we do. Threat intelligence clearly is an area that we're very strong with the Bright Cloud brand, with the ArcSight brands. And so, we can get even stronger with exploring AI there. But the talk is out a little bit ahead of where I think most consumers or customers are ready to really consume it,
Yeah, it runs the gamut from this is going to take over our jobs to Skynet.
Right, that's right, exactly.
So the reality is a little more boring.
Grounded, a little more grounded, that's right.
Yep. So where is OpenText on the showroom floor this year?
We are, we're actually in two spots. And so we have a Bright Cloud booth, which is, as I mentioned, our threat intelligence offering. And then we have in the North Hall, we have a big presence where that's the place where people can actually come over and see a demonstration of some of the unique innovations that we have. We're in a very, very privileged position to be able to take under our own roof, take some of these brands like Voltage and look at using, for example, the Voltage File Analysis Suite, pairing that with legacy OpenText Documentum, and being able to do a quick scan of the Documentum environment to see if there's sensitive information that may exist in that environment, and then coupling that with, coming in behind that with the Voltage data security offering. So if you do detect something, that you're able to actually act on it, whether you want to encrypt it, whether you want to just quarantine it, whatever the case may be. We have a lot of those kind of capabilities that we'll be talking about at the booth. So,
very good.
Yeah.
Well, enjoy the rest of the week.
Thank you, Bill. We appreciate the opportunity to be here.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Welcome to RSA Conference 2023. We are back live in Broadcast Alley. It's so good to be back in the middle of the conference. I'm your host, Matt Alderman. For this interview segment, we have Randy Watkins. He's the Chief Technology Officer at Critical Start. Welcome, Randy.
Thanks, Matt. Glad to be here.
We're going to talk about managed detection and response.
Sounds good. I know a little bit about that.
Good. So one of the kind of precursors for this is this discussion about skills gap, right? We actually did a pre-recorded session that aired today on Business Security Weekly talking about is it a headcount problem or is it a skills problem? I'd love your take because I want to see if you align to kind of where we concluded. Like, what is the challenge when it comes to security resources?
I'm going to go with a firm yes. It's kind of both. Right, it's a headcount problem and it's also a skills problem. You can put as many headcount as you want there, but if they don't know what they're doing, then you're kind of in the same boat. So what we're seeing is a combination of the two, and the headcount shortage that we're seeing is more the seasoned professionals that really understand how to investigate and respond to some of the alerts. But there's also the headcount problem of doing that really basic, rudimentary Tier 1 and 2 triage. And a lot of that was taken over by automation. But as attackers start to change their TTPs, the automation doesn't necessarily keep up. You need new playbooks, and that kind of exacerbates that expertise gap. So you have an expertise shortage on the higher end where it's truly into the incident response, forensics, and then managing some of those automation platforms. And then you have the quantifiable headcount shortage on the lower end where it's doing that Tier 1 remediation and investigation of those basic alerts.
We just figured we'd let Meta lay off another few thousand people. We'll fix the headcount problem. We really boiled it down to a skills gap problem, which is, do we have the right skills to address this? And if you're an organization that doesn't have the headcount or the skills, then where do you go to get help, right? And I think that's where the whole MDR discussion starts to come in, right? This space has been evolving over the last couple of years. It's interesting to me because what I want to understand is when you talk about managed detection and response, a lot of people think about endpoint detection and response that's managed, right? Mm-hmm. Which is a very interesting take on it, which is different than the managed security service providers. But is it just managed EDR or is it more than that?
Now it's more than that. When MDR started, and I'd like to think that Critical Start was a pioneer in the MDR space because we've been doing it for about 7.5, going on 8 years, back when it was still MSSP and we were trying to talk about why it was different than MSSP. It was primarily EDR because EDR came on the scene and they gave us unrivaled visibility that we had never had before, and they gave us all this powerful detection capability that we started to leverage and generate so many alerts. But then what do you do with the alerts?
Right.
So MDR, we initially started off looking at products that were very heavy in the EDR space and gave us basic remediation capabilities or containment capabilities to isolate hosts and things like that. Then identity started to step up as more of the forefront that attackers were going after, and they were primarily leveraging that through email. So you start to bring in some of these other signals and start to really dive into root cause analysis of these attacks, and you realize that just covering endpoint isn't enough. Well, then we started to see a shift from messaging from folks like Microsoft into MXDR because XDR became a big thing.
Right.
So now we're in MXDR. It's really what analyst firm do you want to listen to in terms of what acronym you should align with. But really the MXDR is technically what we're delivering. We still deliver it under the umbrella of MDR, but MXDR is really just bringing in additional signals outside of endpoint, looking at identity, looking at email, looking at third-party signals coming in from a SIM to get more of a holistic view of an attacker's approach.
So you bring up another interesting term, XDR, right? We went from EDR to XDR. We went from managed MDR to managed MXDR, whatever it is. But where is the difference still between the old traditional MSSPs and this new kind of managed set of services? Because, if I go look at the old managed security service providers, they're doing pieces of endpoint, they're doing pieces of XDR. Like, what really differentiates the MDR vendors from the MSSPs? Is there something missing, or is there something different, or the approach that really differentiates the old, I'll call them stodgy because I'm old, MSSPs versus like the new young kind of up and coming MDR vendors?
So I call them legacy. A little bit of a respectful tribute, but it's kind of a theological discussion that I'll pair back to when MSSPs were born. Security was born as a means to accomplish compliance. And in my mind, MSSPs were that checkbox. They were doing kind of minimum value add. They weren't really pursuing attackers. They were more escalating alerts. They were providing 24/7 support, but they weren't really doing anything with the data they were bringing in. So fast forward to today, the cost of a breach is almost outpacing the cost of non-compliance. So you see a mindset shift in CISOs today, and they're saying, you know what, it's not just about being compliant, it's about truly being secure, because I can't recover from the brand and reputation damage of an actual breach. So I need my MSSP to do more. I need them to actually contain 24/7, not just escalate these alerts to a team that's not responding to it.
Right.
We really just replaced alert fatigue from products with alert fatigue from MSSPs. So MDRs really started off with containment capabilities, really emphasizing that R in MDR. We're detecting, but we're also doing a thing. And that's where we kind of draw the line today. MSSPs are more console management. They're doing things like firewall rules management, and patch management. And now MDRs are doing more of the cyber threat prevention. And you do see MSSPs using the MDR. You do see some MSSPs truly delivering MDR. And I think you're going to continue to see that kind of be the line of delineation. Are you managing a device? Are you managing a technology? Or are you preventing and mitigating cyber risk?
Right. You just said an interesting word, preventing cyber risk. Now, when I think of detection and response, I think of signals coming in that are showing me something that's going on right now that I have to respond to as soon as possible to prevent a breach. Preventing attacks, it's a slightly different signal set. So do you cross over into some of the preventative capabilities, or do you focus more on the detection and response? Because there's sometimes it's the same signals, but it's presented in a slightly different way.
Yeah, kind of yes and yes. And if you're being semantically correct, I mean, anything detection and response is reactive. It's not proactive.
Right.
Maybe we're preventing a breach. So we're proactive in preventing a breach by stopping the attack. But really, the detection and response is reactive. What you're seeing now and what Gartner is demanding and Forrester is demanding is really starting to shift left a little bit and look at things like security posture. So we do, for example, configuration validation of all the products that we monitor. You know, garbage in, garbage out. We don't care if we tie into your EDR if it's improperly configured and set to the lowest settings. We want everything to be turned on. So there is more of a shift left, but even in the detection and response space, doing things like configurations validation still improves your security posture without requiring you to really shift left in terms of technology or timeline.
Yeah. Well, you said this earlier with the MSSPs, right? It was firewall rule management, then it was vulnerability detection, right? Kind of the basic stuff. But configuration has always been this big gap, I think, in the industry for a long time, having built the policy compliance module back at Qualys back in the day. It's like configuration matters. Like a misconfiguration is just as bad as a critical vulnerability, but you have to look at all those. So when you define MDR going forward, what are the things people need to think about from their MDR provider? Like what's in scope or should be in scope for an MDR service that people can start to really evaluate the market kind of more clearly now that we've kind of started to differentiate the differences between MSSPs and MDRs?
Yeah, so not to overtly plug our new white paper, but we did just release a white paper on the 10 things you kind of want to consider during the evaluations of your MDR and a couple of pitfalls to avoid. But looking at the space overall, alignment from a technology and strategy perspective is first and foremost. There's a number of different vendors, a couple 100 feet away that are down in the basement. If you have their technology, you definitely want to make sure your MDR supports it one way or another, whether it's reading in the signals or using it for response capabilities. Also, like the level of risk mitigation that they're going to perform in terms of alert resolution is key. One of the big differentiators we see across the space is SLAs. And there's a semantically overloaded term that they're using now called SLOs, where they're service level objectives. Essentially, it's best effort, but there's no contractual obligation to fulfill the duty. And that's kind of dangerous, right? Because you can miss your SLOs, but there's no real penalty.
There's no penalty in the contract for missing your SLO. Because,
Exactly. Either that or they'll align SLAs to critical, high, medium, and low. But who's to dictate what's a critical, high, medium, or low? Because routinely we see attackers using wall bins or live off the land binaries to skate through on medium and low alerts and not really set off the alarms. So you really do have to look at what is your MDR provider resolving and in what time period are they promising that resolution? And then to that point, is resolution. Are they actually going to contain the threat, or are they going to recommend containment? It seems weird that you would be considered an MDR without the R, but we do still see that here and there, and Gartner actually differentiates between big R, little r. Little r being, hey, we'll contain the threat. Big R being, we do have incident response capabilities.
Got it.
So if you don't have that in your plan, if you don't have an incident response playbook or anything like that, definitely leverage your MDR provider to move seamlessly from, hey, we've identified this attack, we've contained it, but we need to do litigation, you need to do legal disclosure, things like that.
Let's talk containment for a second, because you talked little r, big R. Do you need orchestration platforms to orchestrate some of this remediation, right? We've seen this kind of combination of the SIM and SOAR over the past few years. Can I just use a SIM for incident response and use a bunch of manual processes? Do I need to have a SOAR and execute playbooks? Like, is that something people should evaluate as part of their MDR provider, or doesn't it matter?
If you already have a SIM and a SOAR in place, it's good to ask your MDR provider how they're going to leverage your technology to do that response. If you don't have a SIM and SOAR in place, then it's good to ask your MDR provider what they use for the detection and response. Most MDR providers, including ourselves, are going to have a homegrown SOAR platform in the background. So really what customers should ask about is transparency to that SOAR platform and how it's being leveraged to respond more quickly to those threats. So it comes down to, do I get access to that platform? How do I see what you guys are doing? How do I validate what you're doing? And then how do you ensure quality assurance across your entire platform? Because MDRs can actually be just as disruptive as an attacker if you go through and start isolating endpoints with no real checks and balances in place. So everybody's going to use a SOAR. It's just a matter of how they use it. What access to it does the customer have, and is there quality assurance in place to make sure they're not, almost acting as bad as an attacker?
Yeah. I got one more question for you. It's kind of a curveball, but not really. When we think about breaches, 82, 86, 88% come from the human element, right? These have been things that have been published in the Verizon Data Breach Report for a long time. And if we're focused on the endpoint and the network and all these other things, do we have enough human context in these services to really help us understand where some of the human risk is in the environment? I'm just curious where this market continues to evolve, because we see the human still being the biggest component. So we know it's not just a technology problem anymore, but are we seeing some enhancements, some innovation to really understand the human element in these types of services to give us better context so that we can be a little more targeted also in some of our response activities? Yeah,
over the last couple of years, there's definitely been a resurgence in, going after users, going after their IDs, and we call it Layer 8. Layer 8 is obviously the most susceptible layer to attack. And it's also the cheapest for an attacker to go after with the lowest risk of getting caught. So actually, about 3 years ago, the term ITDR started to emerge, the Identity Threat Detection and Response. It was almost like a brother to MDR. But really, that's kind of merged together in the MXDR platform. And we do see enough signals if we're getting those signals. The problem is often that the customer doesn't have the necessary technology or they can't feed it to the right location to get the signals to properly align with the endpoint. And that's where true MXDR platforms like Microsoft with Sentinel, they really start to combine those signals to provide a great holistic view of the attack. So we can say, hey, it's a compromised machine, but it really started from a compromised user credential that's logged into 18 other machines.
Right.
And then you can respond on both the endpoints and the identity and really kind of cut the attacker off from all angles.
And oh, by the way, they have privileged access and yeah,
Exactly.
all those other indicators.
Well, that's a good thing about some of these different identity providers is they're able to wrap in the context of what they have access to with the context of the riskiness, the risky actions of the user to give you that better view of this is the user account and it is compromised. Here's the blast radius given that compromised account.
Right. So MDR expands to cover all the different angles to provide customers a better detection and response capabilities. That's what I just heard today.
That's the goal. That's what we're after.
Awesome. Randy, thank you so much for joining us. If anybody wants to learn more, please visit securityweekly.com/critical start RSAC. Thank you for watching and listening.